I was a jump master in the 82nd Airborne Division in early to mid-2002, preparing for our first deployment to Afghanistan when I first met Lieutenant Blanco. We were doing a late day jump and assemble with combat light, meaning just our canteens and assigned weapon, on Holland Drop Zone. Anyone who knows Fort Bragg knows that Holland Drop Zone is a bit of a haul from the main cantonment area. Being late in the day, I left nothing to chance. I had a London Bridge 3-day pack that could be jumped, so I packed a lightweight blanket and a meal. Lieutenant Blanco had never seen this done, so he came over to ask me all kinds of questions. Satisfied that my 70-plus jumps qualified me to be safe with it, he then blessed off and asked more pointed questions like, "Where'd you get that? How much was it? Does it come with the air items?" I knew I had a convert to what I started calling Combat Light Plus. After Afghanistan, I was asked to go over to the support and transportation platoon under the false pretenses that I would be the new platoon sergeant. I wasn't, but it was too late to back out by then. Lieutenant Blanco was the platoon leader, and Staff Sergeant Bob Casey was the platoon sergeant, despite the mix-up that made me feel right at home. Ernie's infectious smile even kept my morale up. Bob and I were two of a mere handful of multiple combat veterans in the battalion. Bob was one of the first in the Gulf War, and I had been there in the 82nd as a PSC. So Ernie leaned heavily on our experience in training the boys for Iraq, which everyone knew was the next mission. Once in Iraq, we had to split the platoon. They moved half of us, with me in charge of one group, into a tent out back on the other side of our fob, while the other half lived in the building with air conditioning. One night, I snuck into the building and wrote above their door, one half, one half, one half, one half, one half. And on our plywood door, I wrote 0.5 knots to see if anyone caught on. After almost a month, he came and asked me what it meant. I said it meant his crew were the halves, and mine was the half knots. He laughed and then said, "Please take it down." The point was made, so I did, and we got air conditioning right after that. By Christmas, he'd been promoted to captain and was the picture of Christmas cheer. He had a Santa hat that he wore almost continually, even to Fob Salerno in the dining facility. 3 days later, we were on a patrol to assist our scout platoon, who had had a Humvee tire blowout. We took a mechanic, PSC Southern, and a 3-truck team. I had the lead vehicle, Captain Blanco was in the middle, and I forget who had the rear truck. But on the way back to Fob Mercury, our little postage stamp that we lived on, we had a radio conversation. Ernie asked, as we passed the canal, if it were warm right now, who would jump into that? Not me, I replied. The microbes living in that stuff would not be worth it. Oh, come on, I would, he replied. Several others agreed with him, and a couple agreed with me. 2 minutes later, we passed a gas station, and I heard what sounded like a shotgun blast. Then saw dust and dirt fly past my window from the rear. IED, IED, came the call from my gunner, Sergeant Leo Andrews. We went into our battle drill, punched it up ahead out of the kill zone, and then popped out of the truck to pull security. Sergeant Andrews called out, "I see him! I see the trigger man!" "Where?" I asked. He called out a distance and direction to describe the man's jacket. "Are you sure?" I yelled. "Positive." He was 400 meters away, sprinting in an oblique, but I took aim and fired. And missed. "Who fired?" yelled Andrews. "I did," and that was the permission they needed. They opened up with the 50 cal just as Ernie's Humvee, and then the trail LMTV pulled forward and inverted our formation, so I was now the rear truck. Then the Mark 19, a 40-millimeter grenade launcher, opened up, and it became a mad minute. Then Andrews called down, "Sergeant Heitman, go see Captain Blanco." I bolted forward to receive our follow-on orders. Ernie was slumped forward. "Sir," I yelled at him. "Sir!" No response. All of my EMT training went out the window. All I could think to do was take my right index finger and middle finger and touch his forehead and push it up. Blood poured from his mouth, and I knew he was gravely injured. I looked over at his driver, Specialist William Hunker, who was bleeding from his ear, and yelled, "Charlie Med, now!" I looked up at PSC Smith, the gunner in the now lead truck, and repeated the order. They took off in a cloud of dust, and I had to double time back to my truck and climb in while giving the order. For 30 seconds, we were the sole American presidents. Not a comforting thought considering what we'd just seen. We sped quickly to catch up and must have averaged 75 miles on the way to Fob Salerno and Charlie Med. They tried for half an hour to revive him, but he had been mortally wounded when the steel plating we'd installed as armor on the light-skinned Humvees fragmented and pierced his skull above his right ear and traveled through his brain. I had the honor of escorting him back to Dover Air Force Base and mortuary affairs. At that point, I was turned around, being insufficient rank to take him all the way home. Years later, being stationed in Texas in order to retire, I finally had closure and met his mother and sister at his grave. I eventually moved down to San Antonio, where he's buried. His family has moved away, so now I'm the curator of his grave, at least in my mind.